So let's go ahead and get started. Sam, do you want to start sharing the slides?
Yep. Great. Can everyone see that okay?
Okay, welcome again. My name is Shayna Hirschfield Gold. I am the climate coordinator for the city of Oakland. We have a big lineup of speakers and information for today. And so we're going to dive in. I will be introducing people as we move forward through this presentation. Let's go on to the next slide. But we have like I said, a packed agenda, and we are going to be talking about how we move into this new world in Oakland, where all of our buildings and all of our transportation is electrified. We have some very wonderful, very smart, very passionate, dedicated people here to help us talk through this. But I want to say at the outset that this is very much not the last time we're going to have this conversation. There's going to be a lot of community engagement and community conversation happening throughout the next year as we work towards how are we actually going to do this. So we're going to cover what it is we're actually targeting, why we're looking to eliminate gas and fossil fuels in Oakland, and then we're really going to dive into how can it happen. And we'll talk a little bit about the technologies and kind of some objective information out there, but the main focus of today is to talk about that how with all of you, with the community here all together, and really get into, as a community, how can we make this happen? I very much hope you can stay to the very end, because we're going to talk about the timeline of what's going to happen over the next year, because we are on the hook to come back to city council by the end of 2022. That's basically in 1 year, with a full plan for how we're going to pursue electrifying buildings in Oakland over the next 19 years. Can you go on to the next slide? So without further ado, what is it? The what? Why are we here? We are on the hook to get all of the gas out of all of our existing buildings by 2040. Council committed to this in 2020 through the Equitable Climate Action Plan. And we're already there with new construction. In December 2020, council passed requirements that all new construction has to be all electric, basically effective immediately. So we saw that as just a step. That was not an end unto itself. That was the first step on getting gas out of all of the buildings in Oakland. And it's very tied also to moving toward a fully zero emission transportation network. There's a lot of action happening all across the state and country to facilitate this. And we're tapping into a very renewable grid. By 2030, our colleague Becky from East Bay Community Energy will talk about this. We have an increasingly renewable electric grid. So we really have what I think of as a virtuous cycle here as we electrify everything. So let's move to the next slide. Why are we pursuing this? First and foremost, it's about health. There's a lot of research that's come out in the last few years about how much burning gas in our homes affects our health. In fact, we know that children who grow up in a home with a gas stove are at a 40% increased likelihood of developing asthma in their lifetime, 40%. And that is irrespective of whether there's a hood vent, whether it's a small, poorly ventilated apartment. So you can see that, you know, for certain people, certain populations, that number is going to be a whole lot higher. Indoor air pollution mixes with outdoor air pollution. So especially for folks living near acute sources of outdoor air pollution, like along freeways, near industry, you have it coming and going with pollution inside your home and outside. That contributes to not just asthma, but other respiratory diseases, other poor health outcomes. If we can electrify our homes and have that clean, well-ventilated indoor air, you have much better protection from smoke days. And we know that those are coming a lot more frequently. And simply comfort, upgrading our homes, not just electrifying, but paying attention to the comfort, to the energy efficiency, to the building envelope, can really increase the comfort, how warm or cool or basically safe we feel in our homes. Which brings me to safety and resilience. We know that gas is combustible, it's flammable, especially in an area where we are at such high risk of earthquakes. Let's reduce as many opportunities for our buildings to catch fire and explode as possible. When we do have those types of acute incidents, there can be a lot of displacement, further exacerbating what's already a really tough housing situation in the Bay Area. And we will all be talking about equity a lot today, because we need to think about for whom is it easier to build back if they do lose their home, if there is a major incident that makes their home or their business uninhabitable. So this is very related to housing affordability, housing displacement, housing security. If you have an all-electric, efficient home, you have the option, you have the ability to have backup power when there are power outages, and to guard against increases in natural gas utility rates. We know that gas rates are increasing much faster than electric rates are increasing. And so as that goes on over time, having an all-electric efficient home is going to help to protect families in terms of their economic security. And then simply aging infrastructure. We have two aging systems in parallel right now, statewide, nationwide, in terms of our gas system and our electric system. And we know that one of those can be made much safer than the other. So there's a consensus now that we need to really invest in our electric system and start transitioning gently, equitably toward an all-electric system, so that we can have that virtuous cycle I mentioned. And then simply from a climate perspective, we know that methane is what's called a climate forcer. We have to move away from gas, which is methane, if we have a chance of achieving the climate targets that we have all talked about globally around the climate crisis. We know that cost is a major issue here. The city of Berkeley recently did a study finding that the upfront costs of fully electrifying a single home range from $10,000 to $22,000, but those are upfront costs, and over the lifetime, there are savings of up to 91% of energy bills. The way you do this really, really matters. And we know that the installed costs of heat pumps, which are the efficient electric alternatives to gas, water heaters, gas space heating, those costs are going down. The National Renewable Energy Labs estimated that those costs, also solar, are going to go down 10% by 2030 and keep on going down. And so when you combine that with the increase in gas rates, the calculus starts to look better and better. We also know that there are lots of other challenges, which we're going to get into today. There are equity challenges. There are a lot of competing needs, especially, I mentioned earthquakes. We need to do seismic upgrades. We need to do electrification upgrades. There's a lot that we have to balance here. And labor is a big issue too. I think a lot of you have participated in the workforce development stakeholder series that we've been holding with a number of partners here in Oakland, looking at how are we going to do this just from a labor and training perspective. I mentioned that there's a lot of work going on around this all across the state and across the nation. So there are a lot of resources that we can be tapping into as we go through this transition. We are very much guided by equity as we do this. I'm not going to read through these because we'll get into this a bit later, but we lean heavily on a framework that was developed by the Greenlining Institute that really talks about an equitable process for electrifying. And I think many who are in this meeting were part of the process of creating Oakland's Equitable Climate Action Plan and the associated racial equity impact assessment and implementation guide, which went into a lot of detail around how do we electrify buildings and transportation equitably. So you see here a number of the things that we need to be focusing on according to that implementation guide in order to do this equitably. But of course, that was a preliminary assessment. So now the process that we're launching today is, what are the specifics? How do we specifically prioritize medical baseline customers? How do we specifically make sure that financial assistance gets to those who need it? And on and on. So this is the timeline. I'm going to revisit this at the end of the meeting, but you can see we're right about in the middle of this timeline here. Next March, about 4 months from now, city staff are on the hook to bring 3 informational reports to council. One looking at the workforce needs of this transition, one looking at opportunities for major retrofits, which is one of the things that's going to come out of this meeting, and one looking at what are the needs of and resources for specifically restaurants and affordable housing. Sorry, that's cut off there. We're also at the same time going to be bringing a zero emission vehicle action plan to council. So again, this conversation is part of a series of community conversations that will inform these. So I think without further ado, we can move to the next slide. And I think we're going to be handing this over to Becky Menton, who oversees building electrification work for East Bay Community Energy, our wonderful electricity provider. So Becky, I'll hand it to you.
Thank you, Shana. I'll go through these slides pretty quickly. I wanted to introduce who we are, East Bay Community Energy, and contextualize a little bit how we work with the city of Oakland to help deliver on climate commitments that can be achieved through electric buildings. So for those of you who don't know, East Bay Community Energy is a community choice aggregator. We're a local government energy supplier. And our whole objective is to try to increase the saturation of renewable energy in our electricity products. So the electricity that you use, we make decisions about where that electricity is sourced, and we try as much as possible to promote renewables. You go to the next slide. A brief note on how this works. For those of you who have never heard of us or of community choice aggregation more generally, we partner with the incumbent utility in our region, that's Pacific Gas and Electricity. They manage the infrastructure that moves the power across the state and to your home, whereas we make decisions, as I mentioned, about where that power comes from. So it really is a two-part relationship. You can move down. One of the nice things about having a local government energy provider is that we are not for profit. This means that any revenue that we make on electricity sale is recycled back into the community. Some of the ways that this shows up is through the local programs that we're able to implement and offer. All these programs are really designed to help our customers manage their energy use and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in buildings. Two of the programs I wanted to talk about are our solar and storage program called Resilient Home. This is a program where we pre-negotiated pricing on solar and battery storage systems that can be installed on your home. It's a really great opportunity to start to make the most out of an all-electric building. Another thing that we've been really focused on at EBCE is induction cooking. Induction cooking is cleaner, it's healthier, it's faster, and it's safer than the natural gas alternative. But very few people have actually experienced working with induction cooking, and there's a lot of resistance to transitioning over. So we're trying to support the transition to electric buildings by promoting these new technologies. A little bit about why our role here is really supportive for the city of Oakland. As Shana had mentioned, California in general, and our agency in particular, are really striving to get to a zero carbon electricity future. For California, those targets are 2045. In EBC e-service area, just last year, our board adopted a target to have a zero carbon electricity product for all of our customers and constituents by 2030. As we see a cleaner and cleaner electric grid, and as more and more cars start to transition to electric vehicles as well, the gas that's used in our building becomes a larger contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. And it really is the remaining frontier that we need to tackle if we're going to get to our zero carbon future. When you have a 100% carbon-free electricity product, an electric building therefore can be powered on this fully electric, fully renewable power source and does not become reliant on a carbon-based fuel to provide the energy that's needed. Another thing that's worth noting real quick is that we actually have an overproduction of renewable energy at certain times of the day. You may not know this, but in some instances, we're actually paying other states to take our solar energy because we have a mismatch to our supply and when we use energy. Electric buildings are another way to resolve this issue. As we start to increase the amount of electricity that's on our grid, those buildings can help actually consume more of that energy, which is more effective for the system throughout. I'm not going to restate the benefits of electrification because I think Shayna did a really good job there, but these just reiterate the fact that there's a lot of co-benefits beyond the climate benefits associated with these electric buildings. And we're really excited to partner with the city as they take this on. There's some appendix slides here. We don't have to go through these right now. We can just shift right on to Nick.
Thank you so much, Becky. And there will be time for some Q&A when we finish these presentations. I want to hand it now over to Nick Durr of the Association for Energy Affordability. Nick is a recognized expert in electrification, and AEA is the local organization that has focused on equitable electrification and energy efficiency, especially of affordable multifamily buildings, as well as other building types. So Nick, I will hand it to you.
Great, thanks, Shayna. And I'm going to stay super high level here to the extent possible. This is normally like a 3-hour training we give that I'm going to try to condense into 10 minutes. So bear with me and feel free to ask questions when we open it up in a little bit. So next slide, please. So in general, what I'm going to be focusing on are the different technologies that are available for electrifying existing buildings, residential, single family, multifamily, commercial, et cetera. The first is electric space conditioning. Like Shayna mentioned earlier, really the crux of the opportunity to electrify gas loads is because of heat pump technologies. Heat pumps are super efficient, 300% efficient. And so essentially what that means is they can use very little electricity to create heat and air conditioning for space conditioning systems, as well as creating hot water. Next slide, please. So typical heat pump HVAC systems that one could use for single family homes, for apartments, or really any floor plans up to say 5,000 square feet. You could use a ducted heat pump. It looks just like a ducted gas furnace or a ducted air conditioner. You can provide both space heating and air conditioning through that system. There's also mini split heat pumps. I'm sure folks have seen those before in different locations, but you can have different zones in each part of the room or the building that provides heating and cooling. And you can also do packaged heat pumps. And so these are really effective, especially for retrofit conditions where you're, say, removing a gas wall furnace, or you're removing a larger pre-existing system and you want to add just a simple through the wall terminal unit in each of the rooms in a building, in an apartment, or in a home. Next slide, please. So what's nice about electrifying gas heating to heat pump technologies is you've now added air conditioning. So any buildings that have air conditioning currently, there's a lot of options for just converting that air conditioner to a new heat pump. Essentially, it's this similar type of equipment, but now instead of just doing air conditioning, it can do both air conditioning and space heating. However, if they only had gas heating before, with the heat pump, you now get air conditioning. As we are all experiencing, there's increasing number of heat waves. So this is a real value add for occupants in various buildings to now have air conditioning availability. Next slide, please. There's also heat pumps for larger commercial type applications, or in a multifamily building, maybe a whole building HVAC system. Examples of this are called variable refrigerant flow, package rooftop heat pumps. So it looks just like those package rooftop air conditioners or furnaces, but now it's all electric and provides high efficiency space heating and air conditioning. Or if the building before had, say, a big chiller that provided chilled water, and then it had a boiler that provided hot water for heating and cooling, you can get a heat recovery chiller, basically a chiller plant that does both heating and air conditioning. One area that to be addressed, one barrier, is that a lot of our older building stock that has big central boilers, say for hot water or steam, that's providing the space heating now. Electrifying those, there are products being developed, but they're not market ready. And so the options are really to kind of maybe go away from those old big central systems and now add HVAC at the individual space. Way more efficient, but there's definitely some construction details and construction costs that need to be worked out in order to go from a big centralized system down to a unitary system. Otherwise, potentially additional products coming online that can replace those big gas boilers with a new high efficiency electric heat pump that makes hot water. Next slide, please. The real greenhouse gas opportunities in our mild climate is around water heating. So this is where most of the GHGs come from our existing buildings, is the gas that's going into heating water, that's going to our showers and faucets. This technology is actually pretty mature. So on the residential side or small commercial side, there's heat pump water heaters that look very similar to the existing gas water heaters that we've seen in those applications. So you can do a split heat pump water heater where the tank is inside and then the heat pump itself is outside. Or you could do a combined tank type heat pump water heater like each of those you see on the right. There's definitely some design consideration and install considerations that are needed to be accounted for when installing these heat pump water heaters. The technology itself is readily available. Next slide, please. There might be one above that? Or no, yeah. So here's some pictures of those residential. No, you're fine. Some residential, small commercial tank type heat pump water heaters. Next slide. And then for larger, multifamily buildings, many of our multifamily buildings have one big hot water plant for the whole building, or maybe commercial facilities as well that have a large hot water boiler currently for domestic hot water. There are central commercial type heat pump water heating equipment that can replace those central gas water heaters. So they make integrated tanks like you see on the right, where it's just a very large heat pump connected to the tank. Really great application for smallish multifamily buildings, maybe under 20 units, but also really great applications for restaurants in particular. Not only will it create enough hot water for the restaurant's hot water usage, but if you put this in the commercial kitchen, it's also going to provide free air conditioning, and those kitchens can get pretty hot. Or on the left, you can see commercial size heat pump water heaters. Many of these can be sited outside, so work just fine up on the roof, and then are paired with storage tanks. Next slide, please. So we're going to go through a slide deck. These are all real world examples of these central heat pump water heaters, all of them installed in the Bay Area. So there's an example here of some equipment up on a roof. Next slide, please. This is a garden style multifamily property. So the tanks are there in the old water heating room, and then they put the heat pumps outside in that concrete pad. Next slide, please. Very similar application. This is a mid-rise multifamily building that did a very similar approach, put the tanks where the old gas water heaters were, and then put the heat pumps outside on the concrete pad. Next slide, please. This is over in San Francisco. This is a larger commercial institutional facility that put their central heat pump water heating equipment up on the roof. Next slide, please. Additional examples of the same project. You keep going. This is a mid-rise multifamily building where they put the heat pump water heating equipment in the underground parking area. So both the storage tanks and the heat pump water heating equipment all existed in that underground parking area. Next slide. And this is actually right here in Oakland. So this is a multifamily building that did a retrofit system up on the roof. So the old gas water heaters are up on the roof, and then they retrofit it to a heat pump water heating system also installed up on the roof. And then in addition to space heating and water heating, there's also electric cooking opportunities. Next slide. You know, we're all used to the middle one and the one on the right, traditional electric resistance cooking, but induction really is the most attractive of the electric cooking opportunities. Next slide, please. I think it's gonna do a couple. Induction, what's really great about induction, super fast response time. So you can boil water in half the time as any other gas or electric stove type. It's extremely precise, so you can control exactly the heat you want going to your cooking equipment. And it's really, really reactive and quick. It doesn't generate a lot of waste heat, and so the kitchen doesn't get very hot. So this is great for both homes, apartments, but also restaurants and other commercial applications. And there's also no open flames. And so the only thing that's getting hot is the pan. So it's safe for children, for elderly, and for other applications. Next slide, please. You know, the things to be aware about induction cooking, it is more expensive than traditional gas or electric cooking equipment, but the price is going to be coming down for that as the market increases. And then you do need specialized compatible cookware. Basically, the pots and pans just need to be magnetic. And so, you know, if you actually go and test the equipment or the pots and pans you have in your home currently, you'll find that actually a good portion of them will work just fine. And replacements are available really anywhere you buy cookware. Next slide, please. And then there's plenty of all electric commercial kitchen opportunities as well that's already been existing in the market for decades. Next slide, please. A really great resource for folks that want to look more at commercial cooking and kitchen technology is the San Ramon Food Service Technology Center. Really have great demonstrations, trainings, and existing equipment to demonstrate these opportunities and technologies. Next slide. Laundry drying is another thing that typically uses gas. There's electric resistance dryers that exist right now. You can do a combo unit where it does both washing and drying, which is really nice for those of us that are busy. Just set it and forget it, come back a few hours later, everything's washed and dried. And they also now make heat pump dryers. On the commercial side, currently the only technology we have available to us in North America is the electric resistance dryer. There are commercial sized heat pump dryers available. They're of course being used throughout the world. They're not being used very much in North America. So this is an area of opportunity where we need to get the manufacturers and the vendors to bring this to us domestically. We just need to make the demand and they'll bring it over. Next slide, please. And then a little bit on electric transportation. You know, this is an important thing to also electrify. There's different charging technologies. Essentially, level 1 means it uses less electricity and it takes longer to charge, but less of an impact on infrastructure. Level 2 and DC fast charging charge faster, but they use more electricity. But there are technologies there. Again, the electrical capacity, finding space for the equipment, parking spots are things that we're all going to have to consider as a city. Next slide, please. Now, there are solutions coming online to creatively manage that peak electrical demand so that if hopefully everyone's not charging at the same time, you can manage those chargers so that the demand on the electrical infrastructure is managed accordingly. Next slide. And then for folks that have pools or spas and they want them heated, there are heat pump options for heating those. You can also use the sun to heat those through a solar thermal system, but there's residential and commercial technologies available, tried and true, that are highly efficient at heating pools. If you did want to replace your gas pool heater, there's electric heat pump opportunities there. Really, one of the main things that we're going to need to focus in addition to these installation considerations is the impact on electrical infrastructure. We need to make sure our buildings' panels are sized appropriately, and it's going to require upgrading a lot of panels, adding circuits, upgrading infrastructure overall to accommodate all electric retrofits is going to be one of the key things that we need to pursue as we're making this transition, as well as engaging with the utility in regards to impacts it means to their infrastructure. And I think we'll stop there and pass on to the next folks.
Thank you so much, Nick. I've heard Nick present many times, and yes, jam-packed. You could easily teach a 10-hour seminar on this. Like I said, we will have Q&A, but for now, I am going to pass it to Tom White from Eden Housing. Eden is an affordable housing developer with a large portfolio of properties across the whole Bay Area. Right now, they're renovating a large property to be all electric. So Tom is going to talk a bit about their experience.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am the Associate Director for Building Performance and Sustainability at Eden Housing. We're a 50-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer based in Hayward, and we also manage 170 unit senior community in Oakland, as well as other communities across the Bay Area. And I thought I'd present a short case study on an apartment building based in East Palo Alto, where we take an existing community that has gas and electricity, and we cap all the gas and electrify the existing property. Next slide, please. So Eden's mission is to create and sustain high quality affordable housing communities that advance equity and opportunity for all. And part of my mission at Eden is to make sure that we're mitigating our greenhouse gas emissions that cause climate change, and we're trying to adapt our buildings as much as possible to those impacts. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip over this one because I think if you could go to the next slide, Nick did talk a bit about those strategies. Essentially, we're trying to reduce the loads that that existed on the property before we electrify. And so, as part of doing that, we had to document the existing conditions and try and free up electrical capacity for the new systems. That involves reducing the domestic hot water loads, DHW loads, as much as possible by retrofitting the existing equipment there and appliances, minimizing the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning loads, doing upgrades for the lighting and cooking and miscellaneous equipment, and trying to offset those increased electricity loads with photovoltaics. And Becky and others have talked about some of those non-energy benefits, but let's go to the next slide, please. Since this is a little bit about the community, there was 94 existing units on the property, but we demolished 37 of them to increase the density of the property, but we're substantially rehabbing 57 of them. So the new units, where there had been 37, there will be 185. And so that will be all electric. And then we're electrifying those 57 units. We've just, we're in the middle of construction now. So it's due to be completed in a little over a year. The residents had to be vacated and moved to new temporary property while those 37 units were being demolished. We've had to do some amount of moving to upgrade the existing units. The property will be serving low-income and extremely low-income families, individuals with set-asides for formerly homeless, foster youth, and disabled residents. And we're partnering with the East Palo Alto Community Alliance and Neighborhood Development as a co-owner on the property. And the rehab portion is coming in around $36 million and substantial costs for the new construction. But if you go to the next slide, you can see some of the things that are involved in the new construction, as well as electrification in general, as new HVAC mechanical systems, all new utility service, adding the new photovoltaics, and as well as EV charging stations. So the light blue areas are the building on the left that is being rehabbed. And on the right, that's the new construction, unusual shaped lot. So next slide, please. You can see the sort of the style of the property there, a mix of townhomes and multi-story apartment buildings. We did work with the Association for Energy Affordability, Nick's organization. They provided technical support, and we also had some incentives and grants that offset some of those costs. This is some of the on the plus side. On the minus side, we needed some extra coordination with our subcontractors because we're dealing with new equipment. This is the first time Eden has ever tried to electrify a building. And so we're kind of biting the bullet and giving it a try here to, and it's our first go on electrifying an existing property. And also it's our first time to build an all electric community from the ground up. Some of the problems we're facing that, I think most of the people on the call will be familiar with is in existing buildings, there's typically been a pretty minimal amount of space taken for the indoor heating, water heating systems and space heating systems. And so it's actually been a challenge to bring in some of these larger storage tanks into an existing building and finding room for some of the equipment that you need as you're electrifying the water heating. Specifically, you notice in some of those earlier photographs, there's lots of large storage tanks to keep enough hot water in the system to meet demand. And we also had some challenges with modeling the systems to get through the Title 24 compliance for using central heat pump water heating. And there were concerns about the noise levels depending, because we've, for the existing units, we're putting water heating into closets that are adjacent to the residential living space. Whereas on the new construction, the heat pump water heating systems are going to be on the roof. Next slide, please. We did find that there was a cost premium for the water heating systems. Again, the new technologies, not very well distributed or maintained even in the Bay Area. So some of those costs were offset by the grants we received through the California Energy Commission. And then there were savings for not having to install a gas infrastructure on the new portion of the property. So there's some different pluses and minuses. We definitely need to be monitoring our performance here to make sure it's really cost effective, since this is the first time we're doing this. And we've been, again, assisted by AEA in benchmarking the performance and making sure we're tracking the operational savings. Next slide, please. We're an affordable housing developer, so we rely on state tax credits, and that's the TCAC Tax Credit Allocation Committee and the tax exempt bonds for retrofitting and rehabbing existing properties as well as building new properties. And there isn't yet an alignment of those scoring systems for incentivizing decarbonization and electrification. There are a few programs that do fund carbon reductions based on electrification, but there's still some big challenges to help with the equity and increasing the affordability of building and rehabbing affordable housing. There's some challenges, here, and I guess I'm almost just about out of time. I'll just try to wrap it up quickly, both in terms of the investor-owned utility rates and how those can incentivize electrification, developing some incentives that address the tenant owner splits because many of our communities, the water heating systems, space heating systems are all located in each unit. So they're not central systems. And so there's not a big incentive for Eden as a property manager and owner to cover the cost of electrifying the residents' in-unit appliances. Next slide. I'm going to skip over this. It just covers some of the things that we need. And then last page is the resources that are available. If you go one more slide, just so people are aware that there are organizations, Redwood Energy, AEA, the Stopways that have published these kinds of resources, and they're available for everyone. And feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I think that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tom. And big thanks to Becky and Nick for giving their presentations. My name is Jeffrey Wong, and I'm a sustainability analyst for the city of Oakland. There's lots of questions in the chat. Please keep them coming. But because of our limited time, we'll only be able to address a couple of them. But definitely stay tuned for the breakout sessions for a longer discussion. The first couple of questions actually had to deal with vendors. I think the first one was to Nick about vendors for commercial water heaters, and there was also a question to Tom about which vendors you use for your charging stations. Nick and Tom, if you could just take those two really quickly.
Yeah, I could take the water heating one. So yeah, there are vendors available today, design build contractors that can do this work, as well as MEP professionals that can design these systems and then provide it as a bid to contractors. There's a lot of work happening locally and throughout the state on workforce education and training to increase the pool of contractors that are comfortable installing these types of systems, and then pairing it with rebates to sort of drive that market adoption.
On the EV charging side, we've been working with ChargePoint and EverCharge. And my only concern about and advice for the listeners is that it's not only just the cost of installing the hardware, but also maintaining it and having the internet connection and the feasibility to recapture some of the cost of electricity that's going into the EVs through reimbursements. That's it.
Awesome. Oh, sorry. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Perfect. I see a raised hand from Sheila. Sheila, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sorry, it took me a second. The first question I have is, you're talking about water heaters with tanks. What about tankless water heaters? And I just want to point out a few things. There's a huge accessibility component to this that has not even been touched by these presentations. And I'm totally blind. I have mild asthma, and I would love to not use gas, but I also need heat in the winter. And our utilities are above ground right now. And I won't even go into the ridiculous PG&E nonsense that we go through, but the long-term savings of this would be enjoyed by renters. I live in a duplex. I'm on Section 8. Both of the duplex participants are Section 8 folks, and so I am multiply marginalized, and so are the folks upstairs. And I don't see my landlord doing anything about this because he is here in the county and he doesn't own a ton of properties. He's not one of these slumlords. He's not, a company, but he is also BIPOC. And so it's not like he has a ton of money just to sink into this. And I'm very concerned about people having to move during renovations. I'm because some people are more mobile than others. And some people are not another thing I'm concerned about is the accessibility of the appliances that get installed. This place is very old school right now, but I would love to install, for example, a smart thermostat so that I could control this with my phone and maybe get more precision of the heat. And I'm glad we're having these discussions. I want to be 21st century. Gas is hellaciously expensive, but it is subsidized and electricity is not, by the government and by the oil profiteers. And we got to deal with this stuff. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for your comments. I think maybe Nick, if you can maybe address the question about accessibility of these different electrification technologies, and then maybe Becky, you can comment a little bit about energy affordability.
Sure. Yeah, very quickly. There are not tankless heat pump water heaters. Sort of the technology requires there to be a volume of stored water. So that is one consideration, is that tankless gas had no storage in it. Heat pump water heaters do need some storage. They're still way more efficient than a tankless gas water heater, but you do have to factor in that new space for the tank. Your comment on space heating is a good one. Most of the heat pump HVAC technologies now will thrive in the Oakland climate. There's technologies that work just fine in Minnesota and Canada at this point. So they work well as long as they're selected and sized appropriately. They'll work well on those really cold days. Your point around Wi-Fi enabled or using actual remotes instead of a traditional wall thermostat, really great point. Those options are definitely available on many of these HVAC systems. And on your comment on rentals, it's a really, really good point, especially for these small business owners where the property owner may not have access to capital. There are a number of rebate programs in the Bay Area that can help with this, both from EBCE as well as Stop Waste, who runs a program through BayREN. So there are programs specifically tailored for multifamily rental housing to kind of help address that access to capital that you mentioned.
Yeah, those are great responses. The only things I have to add to help with energy affordability, obviously, if you qualify for the CARE rate, I highly recommend pursuing that if you haven't already, and EBCE can help navigate that process if you're interested. Another thing I'll note is that the future rate case does increase the cost effectiveness of electrification. We're seeing gas rates increase. We think that's only going to continue to happen. So getting electric technologies now can help future-proof your home against increasing costs as we move forward. And then you already seem savvy about wired technologies and scheduling technologies. That's also a very good strategy to help isolate yourself from exposure to peak pricing as the state transitions to time of use rate schedules. So I think those are all really good suggestions. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to the BayREN Home Plus program, which is a great place to start if you're interested in getting rebates for your home. We work with BayREN to stack rebates, so we make sure that it's as seamless as possible for any participants in Alameda County to get the maximum benefit.
Thank you so much for those responses. And I want to thank Sheila for those incredibly good questions. None of this is simple. That's why we're having such a big public discussion about this. And that's why we're looking at a 20-year transition.
I'm sorry, could you do something to send out an email with resources from the chat after the meeting? Chats are not universally accessible.
Absolutely, Sheila, absolutely. And I was just going to say that we will be sending out any resources that are put in the chat, as well as answers to further questions, because there are more questions here than we have time to answer. And so what we'll be doing on our end is circulating any questions that we don't get to the presenters, and then we'll send out those answers along with other resources to all participants after the meeting, after the workshop. But we will again have discussion time, and a lot of the great stuff you brought up, Sheila, is I think perfect for the discussions that we're going to have. Right now, I want to take a few minutes to talk about the city's kind of official goals around housing development and small business and our business and economic development. So I'm going to turn it over first to Brian Warwick from our Housing and Community Development Department, and then we'll move directly to Eric Simunza from our Economic and Workforce Development Department. Brian, go ahead, take it away.
Hi, nice. Thanks everybody for being here. There were a lot of great presentations. I'm gonna just keep it short and sweet with my introduction. I'm a housing development coordinator with HCD, and I perform asset management and asset monitoring functions for our portfolio of city assisted affordable housing projects. We have about 115, 120 properties in our portfolio. It's about somewhere in the ballpark of 6,500 units, and there's another 3,500 units or so of affordable housing in Oakland that is not city assisted. So about 10,000 units total. There's a lot more properties that are not deed restricted affordable housing. So about 170,000 total homes in Oakland. So we're about 5% of the total housing market. So HCD has released a strategic action plan with we're calling a 3P framework of production, protection, and preservation. And electrification can fit within all three of those. Production, obviously, because new construction is going to be electrified. Preservation, we want to rehab properties to bring them into the modern era. And protection, ensuring that people aren't displaced as a result, and that if temporary relocations are necessary, that it's done in a minimally disruptive way. And people have touched on this already, but there's a lot of other issues within older housing stock, like lead abatement, asbestos removal, soft story retrofits. So this might be an opportunity to kind of align all of these issues in older housing stock in order to upgrade our housing. I know that cost is going to be, this is going to be expensive, and we're kind of still trying to figure out how to finance it, where the money's going to come from, everything, what it's going to cost, everything about that. And there's going to be a lot of physical and technical challenges. And I'm aware of the timing for affordable housing rehabs is not necessarily super flexible. If projects have done a rehab and then in the last few years, they might not be on the schedule for another rehab for 30 years. So that is, we want to collaborate with you on kind of figuring out all these solutions, and we're aware that it's an ambitious goal. So just really want to solicit your help in figuring this stuff out. That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And my name is Eric Simunza. I work in the Economic and Workforce Development Department. I'm in the Business Development Division. Our division provides a range of different services for businesses in the city. Includes site selection, permit navigation, marketing, and we also make connections to financial and technical assistance. Within our biz dev team, I myself work on strategic planning initiatives, and I'm a lead on efforts regarding our industrial sector. Our department also includes several other divisions, including our workforce development division. In September, the city released the Economic Recovery Plan, and that identified 5 short-term goals over the next year to guide the city's recovery and inform our next economic development strategy. So I just want to give you a quick overview of what's guiding the work of our department. Our first goal is to increase capital flow to small businesses while reducing racial and geographic gaps in access to various funding and financing options. Our second goal is to close disparities in grants and contracting throughout the city, and to look at ways to remove barriers for small, local, BIPOC, and women-owned businesses. Our third goal is to engage youth and cultural arts voices. Our fourth goal is to expand marketing efforts to support local businesses, and also marketing to attract businesses, especially to industrial lands. Our last goal is about upskilling and reskilling low-wage workers who have either been displaced or are at risk of displacement, and to expand opportunities for youth. And this is really one area where there is some real alignment with building up electrification. because the work ahead will create a lot of good, well-paying job opportunities for Oaklanders. And luckily, the city has partnered with some great organizations. One example, Rising Sun Center for Opportunity. And these organizations prepare Oaklanders for the well-paying jobs that electrification will require. So there are certainly some synergies with economic development goals and electrification. Like Brian said, we are aware of the costs of doing businesses. The cost of doing business in Oakland is a major issue for retaining businesses. And we'll be very mindful of this issue as we explore policies for electrification and all of our discussions that follow. We also recognize that all our different business sectors will have different perspectives and face different issues regarding electrification. And we want to work with our business community to understand all of the issues at play. So really, I look forward to the discussions today and in the coming months to work out all that we need to. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. I now want to turn it over to Mark Hall. Let's see, Mark is an Oakland native and actually used to work for the city of Oakland on capital improvements and sustainability and workforce efforts. But since 2015, Mark has been an energy efficiency project developer working to make a clean energy transition accessible to all. And Mark is going to get into some of the real world challenges of what we're talking about here. So Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks a lot, Shayna. Yes, glad to be here. And yeah, over the last really couple of years, we've been pretty active in the building electrification space and really working with local contractors to expand the access to these local jobs here in Oakland and in the broader Bay Area. And some of the actual, and that's really the biggest challenge that we've encountered is actually finding contractors that have the skilled experience to install these heat pumps, but also that are well-versed in dealing with a lot of the remediation efforts that are needed before you can, even talk about doing efficiency and building electrification. So, just talking a little bit about some of the pictures that you're seeing on the screen here. This map on the lower left-hand corner just shows a number of the code complaints that we found in the city of Oakland. A lot of them do talk about some of the housing habitability issues, lead, mold, and some of them actually call out broken appliances where the heating systems are not working and things like that. And the two students that you see in the picture there, they were actually trained by the gentleman on the right, which is an Oakland-based business. That's Howard Oliver of East Bay Indoor Environmental. That's who we work with to actually conduct the home health assessments to figure out what are the issues that we can connect with these property owners and tenants about that are going to affect their health, but then also support the end goal of actually installing this heat pump technology. So we can go to the next slide. And so, yeah, just to run through these, what we've found, really, we've been really focusing on Oakland and a lot of the quote unquote disadvantaged areas, folks that are, not familiar with this technology at all. And a lot of them, don't usually participate in workshops like this. So there's a fair amount of upfront work that goes into familiarizing property owners, tenants on the benefits with the technology. Upfront cost, obviously, rebates are great, but just thinking about all the additional remediation issues that you have to take care of, you're going to have to probably use some creative social impact financing policy. The permit process is getting better, but looking at ways to possibly streamline this process and encourage more leveraging of resources to speed that up would be great. I talked about the code complaints and soft story retrofits sort of needing to prepare the buildings for efficiency, and then You know, I really can't overemphasize, you know, the issues that we've seen with equity. You know, programs like, you know, BayREN and AEA are, you know, they've been really great partners in helping to bring our contractors on, helping them to understand the application process, but just the sheer lack of contractors that are located here in Oakland that are familiar with doing this type of work, and the willingness, just to be honest, of some of the other contractors that are doing the work to actually work in Oakland. And so what we heard a lot from you know, folks that we're working with in these communities is that they are happy, you know, when we bring our contractors out, that they actually do reflect people in their communities. And sometimes, you know, they're people in their families. We have had some folks go through the training and then refer their family members. So that's a huge one. And then just, you know, that split incentive and fear of displacement. You know, we're using green leases and pass-through clauses to illustrate the benefits to the property owners and the tenants right now. And you know, I'm happy to go into that a little more. But then, you know, just diagnosing issues comprehensively. I talked about remediation. We're working with the National Green Healthy Homes Initiative, and that's just greenhealthyhomes.org, to actually establish a pilot here and formalize that, where that's using they call it the no wrong door model, where you're identifying those home health issues and then performing the energy efficiency retrofit together, because you know that's you know, normally what we've found to be effective. You can move to the next slide, please. And these are just going to be a couple. Oh yeah, so we just talked about that. That's the no wrong door model. And you can see at the top, it's just a mix of philanthropic funding, federal, state, and local, and private sector. We've been working with a company called Black Power to leverage social impact financing to, you know, braid these different resources together for that comprehensive project. And so you can just go to the next one. I'll be brief. Just a couple of case studies. This was one of the first properties that we worked on where we identified, you know, lead and some moisture issues, and we were able to, you know, seal it up and do insulation, actually install one of those mini split systems, because it actually started because the parents were, well, the parents let us know that their daughters were not able to really use their room upstairs because it would just get super, super hot in the summertime. And then the husband, he was, you know, complained about the moisture issues downstairs. So we were able to help them out there. And you can go to the next slide. And then this is actually an affordable housing property in Oakland near Mosswood Park, where it's a similar issues. We actually leveraged the City of Oakland forgivable loan for this to take care of a lot of the upfront home health issues. There was, not just a lack of insulation, but pest intrusion, lots of debris and things like that. And so we did work with, again, East Bay Indoor Environmental on the home health assessment, worked with AEA and BayREN to establish the clean heating pathway rebates, and then came in with some additional financing to close the loop there. Yeah, that project is probably going to be finishing up within the next, I would say, month. And then those contractors are all minority-owned, Oakland-based contractors. And the prime is a woman-owned minority GC. Similar project here. This is in East Oakland. We're actually leveraging the Alameda County Renew program, hopefully on this project. But similar to the others, we came in and did the home health assessment, and did the BayREN energy audit to identify the measures, and also going to be working with a local Oakland minority contractor for this installation as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's so great to have you and the other speakers here with all of the wonderful knowledge. that you have been amassing over the last few years in this rapidly changing field. We're going to now dive into the first breakout session. So this is everybody's chance to honestly to vent and to share your experiences and your concerns and your fears, really, and your great ideas about the constraints and needs as we look toward electrifying all buildings. So what we're going to do, the breakout rooms should be available. You should see a button on the very bottom of your screen with four boxes there. There are several breakouts, and we're asking you to choose which breakout makes sense for the sector that you are in. So you can choose either of 2 single family rooms, multifamily, small business or commercial, or if you want to really focus in on vehicle electrification and charging infrastructure, you can choose that breakout room. There are Jamboards that we will be using for recording everybody's thoughts and ideas. So please do make sure that you are putting your great ideas and your great thoughts on the Post-it notes on those Jamboards. And we do have some people in each room who have experience with the Jamboards. So if you're not sure how to use it, there will be somebody in each room to help you. So go ahead and select one of the breakout rooms. And you've got, let's see, we've got 12 minutes here just to talk through freeform your concerns for this transition. So please select a breakout room that fits with your sector and go ahead, start your discussion.
Can you put me in number 4?
Yes, let's see, 7682. Carmen, are you able to do that?
Yeah, just give me a moment.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I may be able to do it. Here we go.
Could you put me in a single family residential room, please?
Yeah, for the phone number ending in 7682, which one were you wanting specifically? Can you name it?
Number 4, the EV charging.
EV charging. Okay, great. And was there someone else who wanted to be assigned?
I went ahead and put
Oh,
them in
it.
the
Okay.
room they wanted, yeah.
Okay. See, there are still a number of folks who have not selected a room. If you need help with that, please let us know. If you're going to join single family, please join single family 2, because we don't have very many people in that room right now. We want to make sure that we have about even numbers of folks.
Hey, Shane.
Hi,
which one did you want me to be in?
Let's see. Where did
I'm
I?
sorry.
That's okay. You know, a lot of things that we know, but a lot of things that we really need to dive much more deeply into to understand more specifically how do we get at these challenges. And as we're figuring that out, we get closer and closer to figuring out how do we actually address these challenges. So Sam, if you can move to the next slide here. So as I mentioned, we're moving into how do we start addressing these challenges? How do we start moving into really as rapidly as is equitably possible, electrifying our buildings and our vehicles? And we see several kind of what I think of as buckets of action that we took a stab at saying, you know, here are the major buckets or categories of action. What we didn't mention up here is advocacy is another major bucket. And there are other pieces that, may not fall neatly into here. But what we really wanted to focus on for today is what are the things that cities can specifically focus on. There are certain things that only state governments or only federal governments or only the market itself can really do. But cities, local governments do have a lot of options around how can we play our part, play our rightful part in this broad market transformation? What are the tools that are available to us? If we can go to the next slide. As we've mentioned, equity is tremendously important here. I think it was Sheila who did such a great job earlier of pointing out just a few of the many issues that we need to keep in mind. The city of Oakland was very specific when it adopted its equitable climate plan in talking about what are frontline communities, how can we prioritize and deeply involve in program design those communities that are most impacted, not just by the climate crisis and by natural disasters, but who are most impacted by the impacts of policy changes and regulation. How do we maximize benefits, especially to those communities that stand to be impacted the most? How do we prioritize health and safety and resilience, as we were talking about earlier, in this work in electrification? So it's not just about the technical electrification, but all the other benefits that need to come along at the same time. For example, remediating mold, doing seismic upgrades, lowering bills, making sure that people are safe and secure and economically secure in their homes, that the jobs that are being created in this transition are flowing to local Oaklanders, and especially local Oaklanders who need jobs, good jobs, wealth building jobs the most. How do we make sure that implementation is easy and accessible? And how do we make sure that we're improving over time, that we're tracking and transparently reporting on progress as we're going? So let's go to the next slide here. I want to just mention two programs that we're particularly leveraging, although there were other programs that Becky and others brought up. The Switch is On is a statewide marketing and education program that is, it has launched in pilot form. It'll be launching statewide officially in the new year. And this is meant to be, again, a statewide awareness campaign about what is electrification, why is it so important, what is it linked to? And that website, the Switch is On website, has a link to a place where you can actually select, you can find contractors who are vetted to be doing this work. A lot more needs to be done there. This is all a work in progress. There are not a lot of Oakland-based contractors yet in that portal. So that's something that we need to be working on. But this is one of the really important tools that is being developed as we speak, and that we'll be really relying on in Oakland. There's also the Bay Area Multifamily Building Enhancements Program. This is run by the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. And that, like the Home Plus program, is one that is doing energy efficiency and electrification work, and something that we can really tap into to get incentives that we can leverage and build on for electrification. So we'll move on to a list here in the next slide of really, again, what I think of as we're thinking through what role can the city of Oakland specifically play in this market transformation. How do we ensure consistency and rapid acceleration of electrification work while also prioritizing and leading with equity, while recognizing that there are multiple and even competing needs and goals in this space? This is a sort of a preliminary list even of some of the most obvious tools that are available directly or sometimes in partnership to cities. So obviously we'll start with incentives. We all know that cost is a huge issue. We need to reduce the cost burdens. particularly for those who are already cost burdened. There, of course, is something that I think we all would love to have, a government-funded change-out program. Wouldn't it be nice if government could just sweep in and pay for all of this and mitigate the externalities and just make it happen in a fair, healthy way? That would be phenomenally expensive, but there are pilots out there that are doing this at a small scale. In fact, Mark Hall mentioned Block Power, which is a company operating in a lot of different places, including Oakland, and they're doing some work like this in Ithaca, New York. There have been other pilots elsewhere, so is this something we could explore? I won't read through all the rest of these, but you can see that we've tried to kind of categorize and highlight some of the tools that we think could be available, but would need to be finessed, would need to be designed and targeted and tailored for the unique needs of Oakland. I want to go on to the next slide very quickly, because our neighbor to the north, the city of Berkeley, is actually a bit farther ahead than Oakland in terms of building out their strategy for electrifying just residential buildings. So far, Berkeley is only looking at residential buildings, but they have a plan that is very well thought out. It's a beautiful plan. Hopefully, maybe somebody can dump the link to the plan itself into the chat. Berkeley has identified 4 clear categories of work, and each of these have very specific actions and strategies within them. But you can see they're looking at, okay, well, how can we incentivize replacement of systems and appliances when they burn out, when they stop working? How can we use the time of sale or change of occupancy maybe? That's another thing that we're thinking about, to say you have to do certain things. What are those things? There are a lot of things that we could look at: upgrading the electric panel, changing out appliances altogether, doing efficiency upgrades to make it easier. Lots of opportunities at time of sale, but there are also lots of challenges there because we have to think about price and affordability and housing security. And then looking at building performances, setting minimum levels of performance, be it energy efficiency or emissions. And then finally, something that would happen much, much later is looking at how do we electrify whole neighborhoods and actually really eliminate gas to a whole area so that you can actually stop that pipeline in the street where it runs. So maybe we can go back to the slide before this, and what we want to do is open this up for brief discussion. I think we've got about 8 minutes here. For you all to, if you have questions about these, if there are other ideas that you would add to this list, we want to open some time for that now. We're not actually discussing the merits of these ideas. This is really our time to say, okay, what other options are there available? And then we're going to dive into another breakout where you are actually going to talk through these with the other folks in your breakout group and try to identify which of these should the city of Oakland pursue, which of these is not a good idea, what do we need to make sure happens if we pursue one or the other strategy. So again, opening up to discussion, and I see Sheila has her hand up. So a quick question from Sheila. And Sheila, you're muted if you're speaking there. Okay, I'm going to move on to Tim Frank because I see a hand up there.
Hold on, here I am.
Oh, okay, all right, Sheila and then Tim.
It took me a long time to find the mute button, and then that happens on Zoom sometimes. I just wanted to point out that Section 8 tenants are often long-term tenants. We rent, but it's as if we own, because not financially, but we don't have, renters are assumed to be people who come and go in a 2 or 3 year period. And so we are invested in our communities, and I would like to see that investment be leveraged in some way in all of what happens.
Absolutely. That is a great point. Tim?
Yes, the one thing I actually don't see on this list anywhere is, something that's responsive to a couple of points that were made earlier about the need to provide upscaling of low-wage workers, low-wage work to help improve the earning potential of people, particularly from at-risk neighborhoods. And also the lack of a local contractor base. And I think that there's an opportunity to include a workforce development component here that's focused specifically on creating high road careers that are paying prevailing wages and entail the use of apprentices from joint labor management apprenticeship programs, et cetera, to actually make sure that we maximize the benefits in terms of the employment opportunities created by these programs.
I couldn't agree with you more, Tim. As I mentioned, we have had a workforce development stakeholder series. There were 3 sessions in that so far, and there's going to be another one, but I imagine that we will continue to meet and discuss over the next year. Rising Sun Center for Opportunity, based in Oakland, is leading a high road jobs training partnership over the next couple of years, looking at how do we do this right. I know Mark Hall has been doing great work there. So yeah, definitely something that we need to be keeping in mind. Let's see, maybe a couple of more thoughts. So let's see, Amelie is talking about some considerations around replacement and burnout, some challenges in older properties. Yeah, additional electrical work. Yeah, all of these are critical considerations that, you see how complex the policy process is, right? And so that's exactly what we hope that you all be talking about in your breakout rooms. I think I'll take one more question from Eileen, and then we will dive into our breakouts. I'll explain how that'll happen. Eileen, go ahead.
I guess I should maybe save it for my breakout, but I was just going to say along the lines of what Tim was talking about. Like, I think I've found a lot of Oakland-based contractors who aren't necessarily, they don't have the capacity or just haven't gone through the contract compliance stages yet to get local business certification. And that could be a great opportunity for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is all good stuff. And these are all things that, the more that all of you who are here who have real experience with this stuff from whatever perspective, the more you can be adding that to this discussion, really writing those things down on the Jamboards. I think the more responsive we in the city can be as we are proposing and developing policy options and approaches. And so with that, before we dive into our breakouts, I want to very quickly note that we will be continuing this discussion over the next year. I mentioned at the outset that staff is on the hook for bringing a completed roadmap for how we're going to get through this transition over the next year, over the next 20 years. We're on the hook to bring a completed roadmap to council for council adoption by the end of 2022. So these conversations are not idle. This is really what is going to specifically inform what is in that roadmap. So we'll be having another series of, or an ongoing series of discussion over the next year. And I think Jeffrey is going to insert into the chat a survey that we would love for all of you to answer about how should we approach those discussions. There it is. We will put that link in the chat again at the end of the meeting, and we'll send it out along with the notes afterwards, because we really want everybody to weigh in on how should we be approaching these conversations, how frequently should we be discussing. But without further ado, diving into the breakout rooms, please, if you can remember the room you were in before, join that exact same room. And what we will be doing now is literally going through the items in this list and talking about their merits, the concerns, what we should implement right away, what needs further study, what we should maybe implement but farther on down the road. What could we get to right now when considering specifically major retrofits? and dealing with other aspects of the transition later. So please join your breakout room. Again, there are folks in each room who can help you understand more what it is that we're asking and how to use the Jamboards. But I do invite everyone to join your breakouts right away. And we're actually, I think we're gonna do, okay, we just started the clock. We're actually gonna do 15 minutes for these. So 15 minutes, please go ahead and jump into your rooms.
I just closed the room, so they'll be closing in 7 seconds, and I'll redo it for 15 minutes.
Answering our
Perfect.
question.
Surprise, we're all human. Okay, so are they reopened?
Yes, now they are reopened.
All right, if anyone needs assistance being assigned to a room, please let us know. Again, please join the same room you were in before.